Welcome to the MetsBlog Round Table, brought to you by RAM. I'm Matthew Cerrone from MetsBlog.com, and I'm joined again by Marc from Newsday. There it is. McCarthy from WOR, and Anthony DiComo from MLB.com.
Hi, Matt.
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Fine.
So, let's see here. We're going to talk a little bit about the front office, because I think post-DiPodesta, it's a little interesting, right? Like, I think most people kind of saw him as maybe being the heir apparent to Sandy Alderson, but now obviously going to the Cleveland Browns in a surprising move. Kind of leaves the front office a little bit, wondering what's going to happen down the road. So, curious what your thoughts are. Does Sandy elevate to sort of that president role? Do you think he sticks around? I mean, just start with him. Where do you think Sandy Alderson ends up?
I don't think Sandy Alderson ever wanted to be that long-term GM. I mean, he's getting up there in years, and even before his cancer diagnosis and so on and so forth, I don't think he was the guy who was going to be here for years and years down the line. I really was in that camp who thought Paul DiPodesta was sort of the GM in waiting, so his departure changes the landscape dramatically. I think it means good things probably for John Ricco. He'll probably have a shot at this thing. A guy who was largely passed over really when Sandy Alderson's regime interviewed and eventually came on to lead the front office. You're suddenly seeing John Ricco be much more visible in public matters, dealing with the media, so on and so forth. So I think he's going to have a chance. I don't think this is going to just be a total 180 if and when Sandy Alderson leaves. I could see him sticking on in sort of an advisory role, like you said.
Depends on the success of the team, too.
For sure.
Right.
But assuming they have some level of success going forward, I don't think you're just going to get rid of everything and start fresh again with a totally new front office. So that's why I say I think John Ricco has a chance to be very prominent going forward, if not the GM, certainly at least the role he's in now.
When Ricco's been essentially the acting GM twice now. I mean, he was there for a couple weeks.
He's got a lot of experience.
Omar, and
probably
then when you guys were
done
down at the GM meetings, he was the guy really sort of holding the mic, which is, I think, was an interesting choice. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like he would sort of be on deck. I mean, what about JP? What's his situation?
Yeah, I don't get the sense that JP is in the mode where, he wants the day-to-day rigors of this job. It's a really difficult job being a general manager in Major League
And he's
Baseball.
been there and done that.
Been there, done that, exactly. And you look at another thing I think people forget, right? It's important to have the lay of the land where you're working. And I don't think anybody in that... Yeah, right. So I don't think anyone, if you look at it that way, is more qualified than John Ricco, to take over. So I think he's a guy who's been loyal. He's been there. He's kind of seen the life cycles of the franchise. He's been there and back. I think he's well respected in the game. He's well respected in the organization, obviously. And I'm with Tony. I think if I had to bet, it would be John Ricco moving forward. Now, could you see Sandy being kind of that elevated team president, all that?
Well, he fits well with that dynamic.
Yeah, he would. But like even then, like we look at this kind of trend around the game, it's mostly ceremonial. Because it's basically the same job. Maybe the responsibility, some of the day-to-day is slightly divided differently, but it's the same gig. So I'm not sure I see Sandy, when you look at where he is in his career, I mean, what more is there to prove? This guy's won a championship. He's revived the franchise here, respected around the game. I just don't see that being a long-term thing. So, I don't know if I see him necessarily graduating to that, because mostly that's a ceremonial title.
Well, the reality is that if you talk to people with other teams, that's essentially how the Mets have been operating for the most part. I mean, especially this past at the GM meetings this year with Sandy not there. I mean, Ricco's doing a lot of that sort of work and coordinating with the assistants and the scouts, and Sandy's really kind of, taking all of this in.
Well, as far as Sandy goes, I mean, there's so many different roles that could take. I mean, you don't have to be a team president in the Theo Epstein mold where you're essentially the GM, judge, and jury with everything. You can be much more of a senior-level advisory, hey, we've got a question. Hey, what do you think about this trade that we're thinking of doing? You don't have to be in there in the day-to-day. So that's why I think there's a decent chance he sticks around in some role like that, because I agree with you, Marc. You don't want to necessarily, if you're him, keep going in this day-to-day slog of every little transaction. You can still be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. If he is involved, his involvement now takes on this idea, or a part of the involvement would be, I would say, the decision-making. I think that's Sandy's strength. Sure. This guy, he's found a way to make good, sound, rational decisions. It takes patience and discipline, and some of that's just your talent, too. And I think he's exhibited that throughout his career. So, yeah, sure, maybe in an advisory role, maybe I could see that, because certainly that dynamic has worked pretty well for them.
It is interesting, just, you get the tweets from the outspoken parts of the fan bases. We get the phone calls, and, Sandy wasn't necessarily a popular GM until, the winning happened, which is the way it goes. People see there's talent coming up, but, this, the argument is in Omar's team, Sandy's team. But, I do think it goes to show as you start to have this conversation, boy, he's done a lot for this organization, and now there is a little bit of a vacuum behind her, or at least you wonder, how this thing's going to all go going forward.
On the operational side, too, I mean, it really kind of created a little bit of a different culture, a different way of thinking and research and that sort of stuff, too. So, I mean, you got to figure that has to continue on again, assuming that there's been success. Let's hope that the current trend continues and they're in a position that they want to continue that on. So.
And look, there's a structure in place now, and that's within the front office from Sandy Alderson to John Ricco and all the employees below them. That's on the minor league side, the field coordinator and everything they do there. There's a structure in place that wasn't in place before Sandy Alderson, but that will continue as long as you have this regime, and by that I mean not going out and totally starting over with a new GM and a new everything. That's going to continue to be in place long after Sandy Alderson departs.
Boy, I hope so. I am not down for another rebuilding phase. I don't know that as a fan I can go through that again. So.
With Sandy, when you hear him talk about, let's say, the hitting philosophy, which is a big part of what he brought here, the system is the star. I think the same way with the front office. The system is the star. The system being just a logical, patient, disciplined way of making decisions. And so long as there's some holdover from that regime moving forward, I think the system will continue to be the star.
Hey, it works even on us. I've learned more about business strategy and all that stuff thanks to him. So it's been good. Listen, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks. Remember, bookmark SNY.TV and MetsBlog.com for more roundtable videos and full coverage of Mets spring training in Port St. Lucie, Florida.